welcome back to My Brain is a Wonderland Season 2, the podcast for neurodivergent women and the people who love them. Today, you are here with your host, Emily, and we are going to be talking about medication. Just to preface this episode, this isn't saying whether you should take medication or not. I don't fall on either side of that camp. I fall on the side of what works for you. This is just my experience about what I went through and what I'm currently dealing with. So let's get into it. If you haven't listened to my first episode of the podcast called I Have What, I suggest you go back and listen to that because it gives a nice background of how I got to where I am and the space that I was in right around that time because that's when I first started taking medication. I'll give you a little summary. It was 2020, the hell that was 2020 for everybody. I wasn't doing well at work, ended up in therapy, and had made an appointment to get assessed for ADHD. There was a wait list for that appointment, so in the meantime, I was recommended to go to a great psychiatrist by my psychologist who said I might want to look into medication. I was talking with the psychiatrist and we went through little scales of how do you feel like this all the time, never, or how often do you feel like, this, bad, sad, angry, whatever, all the time, never. And it was all the time for a lot of the bad ones, like just feeling sad and depressed. And so this was prior to me being diagnosed with ADHD or autism. So she was coming at this from a depression and anxiety angle. And so she recommended for me to start taking Lexapro. And I believe Lexapro is mainly used for depression. And she said she was going to put me on the highest dose possible, which was 20 to 25 milligrams, something like that. I was prescribed Lexapro. And man, was taking that first pill a doozy. I do have anxiety and was eventually diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and social anxiety disorder. There's probably a bit of a health anxiety in there. And so when I went to go pick up my pills, I had them. I had to have an emergency meeting with my psychologist just to talk it through with her because I had all of this catastrophizing feelings, all of these feelings and thoughts about side effects, about what it would do to me, about what it would mean for me. And so my psychologist was very nice and got me in for a really quick appointment that morning when I was picking up the medication. And she suggested to me that as soon as you get the medication, just sit in the car and take it. Try not to think about it too much. Try not to get into your head about it. So I drove there with my husband, and I did just that. I picked up the pills, and I took them right away. And I forget if there's a timing thing with Lexapro. I don't think there is. I don't think you have to take it at exactly the same time every day. It is helpful, obviously, for timing it out 24 hours. If you take it in the morning, to take it in the morning sometime, versus if you take it in the evening the first time, keep going on the evening. I did have some nausea from taking that first pill and some others after that. And I'd been told that I have irritable bowel syndrome though, so I'm pretty good at managing nausea. It doesn't wreck my entire day because usually I'm nauseous all the time. So I took that first pill, felt that nausea kicking in and knew it was in there and working, and then started taking that pill regularly every day. It took, I want to say, maybe 2 to 3 weeks for the full dose to kick in. And what I mean by that is it has to build up in your system before you start to feel any of the real effects, the positive effects from the pill. And so about 2 to 3 weeks into it, I started feeling different. I started feeling what the effects were from the pills. I will talk about what are the positives. The positives were it was much easier to get out of bed in the morning. A classic thing that I used to do and sometimes still do is I just lay in bed in the morning after I've been awake already. So if I wake up at 6 or 7 a.m., I don't necessarily go back to sleep. I'm not a good sleeper, but I'll just lay there lay there kind of rolling around, lay there on my phone, and then kind of drag myself out of bed when I know I have to get out of bed. So that was a lot easier. I was waking up and then basically just getting out of bed. And that's what I felt I wanted to do and that it was easy to do. The second positive would be a lot more energy, kind of going along with that thing in the morning. It was throughout the day, though. I didn't feel like I had to have a lot of downtime where I needed breaks from life and people and to lay on the couch or take a nap. I just had a lot more energy. And I was definitely not really depressed. My depression kind of just completely subsided. And that felt really good. It felt nice to feel more energized, to feel more in tune with someone I knew I wanted to be, and in tune with feelings that I knew I wanted to feel but hadn't been able to feel in the past. That being said, there were definitely negatives to taking the pills, which I was slowly cottoning on to as more time went on taking the pills. I felt the positives initially, and then started to notice, that's weird, and that's a little bit strange. So I basically realized, I don't know, a few weeks into taking it, just because things would come up and I'd be like, that's not the reaction I would usually have, but I realized that I couldn't really feel anything. So this feeling that I'd had, where I said I have more energy, I can get out of bed, I don't feel depressed, well, I noticed later that I didn't feel much of anything. I used to be a really easy crier, which I think is linked to the depression. You know, I could cry talking about anything vulnerable. I could cry watching an ad on TV that was a little bit emotional, seeing a sad dog on TV. And there were times I liked to cry because it's cathartic. I have videos that I know online that will make me cry. Ones that I think about, maybe hyperfixate on, that, that's so sad, that's so sweet, that's so this, that's so that. And it got to the point where I was watching really sad videos that usually would have made me bawl. And I'm watching them and I couldn't squeeze out a tear. I mean, I felt nothing. You know that feeling where your eyes get kind of swelly? They get a little, you feel the water coming, the tears coming, your chest is emotional. I couldn't feel any of that. And I could tell that I couldn't get there, that no matter how much I pushed to get there, that the pills had just completely put a dam up to that feeling, and I couldn't feel it at all. The other thing was that sex felt also like absolutely nothing. So I couldn't get aroused. Having sex felt like my elbow was being, poked gently. It was, didn't feel like anything. If anyone's seen Euphoria, the TV show, there's this amazing episode where Zendaya's character is having sex with her girlfriend, and Zendaya is high out of her mind, I think on pills, and her girlfriend doesn't know that Zendaya's back on drugs, and her girlfriend is saying, does this feel good? Does that feel good? And Zendaya's character is saying, yeah, if that feels great, totally, whatever. And she says something in the show, I forget the line, but says, I didn't want to tell her that her best work felt like absolutely nothing. And so I think that's really common on pills and on antidepressants, that your arousal just goes to absolutely nothing. Your body mechanics, you can't get pleasure from anything at all. And so that was a lot of the negatives, was I couldn't feel much. So what it did is it took away the depression, but along with the depression, it took away every other feeling. I'm not even sure really I could feel happiness. I was more just really energized and leveled out emotionally. And so I went back to my psychiatrist, because after you start medication, you're supposed to go back regularly, kind of check in and say, how's it going? How's this feeling? Blah, blah, blah. And I checked back in with her and said, look, I can't feel anything. I like the positive effects, but these negative ones suck. So then she took my dose down from whatever the highest, 20 or 25, I think she took it down to 15 or something to try to kind of mitigate those emotional issues and negative feeling and the negative feeling I was having about that. So we took down the dose and I started taking that. And then soon after, or maybe even before that, but I just didn't realize, I started getting a swollen liver. And it was characterized by this hot pain in my back, in my lower back. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I kind of connected it to that. And I think I was talking to my primary care doctor. I forget if I brought it up in relation to the pills or not. But my primary care basically said, you have to come off that pill right away. It sounds like it's negatively affecting your liver. You have to come off the pill. So I basically go cold turkey from Lexapro. I was on the highest dose. I'd gone down to 15. It even hadn't been that long. And I'm told I have to go off it cold turkey. I was also told I cannot take any SSRIs anymore. So SSRIs are a type of medication, usually used for depression. I'm not sure how they function, but I was told I can't ever take them ever again. And the majority of depression medication is an SSRI. So I know instantly that I'm looking at more work and more effort and searching for a pill that might take a long time, and that wasn't a good feeling. So I come off the pills cold turkey, and I think I'm doing fine. And then maybe a week to 10 days after I come off it cold turkey, I am a mess. I mean, an emotional mess. I can't sleep at night. I'm up in the middle of the night crying, just for no reason. I'm just crying. And it really swung the pendulum way the other way. I was more depressed than I had ever been before I took this medication. And the come down was so hard. Trigger warning, I'm going to talk about suicide. Trigger warning, maybe skip ahead 30 seconds to a minute if you don't want to hear about this. I had never experienced suicidal ideation prior to this. I'd never had suicidal thoughts, and that's not to say, haha, I'm proud, da-da-da. It's more to say, I'm glad, I'm blessed that I never had to deal with that. And when I was coming off these pills, one night in the middle of the night, I just had a suicidal thought that just hit me. I was bawling my eyes out, and it just hit me in the face, this suicidal thought. And it really scared me because I'd never had these thoughts before. I was alone. My husband was in the other room sleeping, but I was, felt really alone. I was crying, and it just felt really like, whoa, this is not where I want to be. This is scary. And I didn't even realize it, I think, at the time that it was from coming down off the pills. But now, having spoken to my doctor and the timing, it's just so obvious that that's what it was. Because after that, once I was off of them completely and it was out of my system, I leveled out again. I wasn't that really crying, depressed person. Also, what it did is even though I was off the pills, it almost had like a residual effect on my emotions, that I was able to have more energy still and able to be less depressed. And my psychologist said this can often be where your brain now just kind of recognizes what it's like to be in that other space, so is able to get there easier. When you don't have a blueprint for being happy, not being depressed, and someone says just don't be depressed. Well, how do you not be depressed when you've always been depressed? You don't know what that looks like. So now I think my brain kind of knew what it could look like to not be depressed. And I was able to kind of sit in it in a way that was manageable, that didn't feel as bad. And like I said, I had a lot more energy still. By this time, I had been diagnosed with ADHD and autism. So I went on the pills probably around November 2020. I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism a couple of days after Christmas, December 2020. I was still on the pills, and then I came off of them around February 2021. So I was on them for probably 4 months in total before I came off of them. And then when I went back to my psychiatrist, said, I'm not allowed to take SSRIs, and I've been diagnosed with ADHD and autism. She said, let's try Adderall. Adderall is an amphetamine, an upper that is used for gaining more focus, kind of controlling some of the lack of focus and I think forgetfulness and these kinds of things that are helpful to combat, say, if you're at work, or if you have kids and you're having, you have a lot of stuff to deal with. It's nice to take Adderall in the morning and have it for that 8-hour period that you've taken it for. So she prescribed me Adderall, and I was anxious about taking another thing again. And one of the big reasons is that I have a lot of addiction in my family. My dad was an alcoholic. Most of my cousins were drug addicts, were in and out of prison, and I have addiction issues myself in that I recognize that I can go too far with things sometimes, in that, sometimes I should just have, one drink. But it's hard not to just have one drink, so I might have 5 drinks. Like I spoke about in the episode about binging, it's hard binging food. It's hard to not just have one cookie, I want to have 5, 10 cookies, right? And so I knew that about myself, and I communicated that, and she said, keep in touch with your doctor. And I basically didn't take the Adderall, and I spoke with my primary care doctor, and we decided that if I didn't want to take it, that was perfectly fine with her, and I decided not to take it. So I now have a bottle of expired Adderall still sitting in my house, chilling out. I don't know why I haven't thrown it away. It's one of those things, you feel like it's wasteful, but you can't give it to anybody. That's illegal. You can't sell it, obviously. I'm not going to take it myself. It's now expired. What do we do? I don't know. It's going to be like those spices you find in the back of your cupboard 30 years later that your mom has, but mine's going to be Adderall or something. So I decided against taking that, didn't take the Adderall. Then I probably went around 18 months between being prescribed that Adderall and deciding not to take it, and going back to the psychiatrist again to kind of say, look, I might be struggling a little bit, or maybe those feelings that I had that were positive after the Lexapro has now subsided. I'm not as good at handling my depression anymore, and maybe if there's something for ADHD, I wouldn't mind trying that. So I go to the psychiatrist, and they talk about a medication called Wellbutrin. So Wellbutrin is an interesting medication because it's not an SSRI, and it's prescribed for both ADHD and depression. I think it's a combo situation there, that I think it's primarily prescribed for ADHD, but also is helpful for depression. Maybe it's the other way around, I'm not sure. And the psychiatrist told me, oftentimes when they're prescribing medication, they'll ask you if there's a side effect from it, whether you have certain issues that may be affected by the side effect. And the psychiatrist said to me, do you have a history of seizures? And I said, no, I don't. Which, I'm thinking epilepsy. That's really all I was thinking, was epilepsy, really. I'm going, no, I don't have a history of seizures. So I was prescribed the medication, got off the phone call, and it went through to my pharmacy, and they said I could pick it up. And then it came to me before I went to go get it, because apparently that's one of the risks of taking Wellbutrin, is it can cause seizures. And so if you have any history of it, they won't give it to you at all. And I remembered I have had a seizure in the past. I actually am at risk for heat seizures. So I had a seizure one time when I got out of a hot tub because I went from cold to hot. And actually recently I was playing tennis in Florida in the middle of the day and almost passed out, and I could feel it coming on, the same thing, that I was going to have a seizure if I didn't get off the court. And so I realized I do have a history of seizures, spoke with the psychiatrist, and they said, yep, okay, we're not going to do Wellbutrin. That was probably now about 6 months ago, maybe a little less than that. And since then, I have not pursued medication. Quite frankly, the whole idea just is exhausting to me. And maybe if I was on an antidepressant, it wouldn't seem exhausting to me. But honestly, the entire idea of having to go through these medications, go on to one, take it for a month because you have to wait for it to build up, feel the side effects. Does it work? No, it doesn't. Come back off it. Have a terrible come down. I mean, I'm really not looking forward to that at all. Another trigger warning for suicide, skip ahead 30 to 60 seconds. I am terrified of having that feeling again. It's the only time, like I said, I've ever had that feeling, and I really don't want to feel that ever again. And if that means I have to experiment with medications, come on and off them, it just sounds awful to have to go through that again. Another thing is that I'm at childbearing age. I'm in my 30s, my late 30s. And so it's getting to the point where I kind of have to pull the trigger or say I'm not going to do it or decide what I'm doing. And most of these medications you can't take while you're pregnant. You know, if I get pregnant, decide to, or by accident or something, I have to all of a sudden come straight off of my meds again and go cold turkey, go through all of that while I'm pregnant, and then have to deal with having been medicated and then all of a sudden thrown into pregnancy unmedicated. And then you're giving birth to a child, you might have postpartum, and then go back on meds again. I mean, look, guys, I can tell I'm taking 20 steps forward when I'm on birth control and not even planning a baby, but you see where I'm going with this. The whole thing just sounds so exhausting, and I'm not sure the benefits are there for me that I really want to feel. I would like to have something that levels out my mood a little bit more, but I don't want to not feel everything else, you know, that it has to be a balance. And I have a feeling that if there's something that takes depression away or anxiety, that it's going to take other stuff away that you like to feel. I'm just not sure about that. My pattern has kind of been a 6 to 12 month. Well, there was that 18 months between those other meds. So I don't know, maybe a year or more. I'm not good with feeling the time out right now. Where I'm kind of, okay, maybe I'm ready again. So that was 6 months ago, about where I decided no to the Wellbutrin. So we'll just see going forward. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, I'm not telling anyone whether to take meds or not. If it works for you, and I hope it does, I hope there's a key there for a lot of people. If it does work and you have access to it, that's great. Take it. Take it if you feel like it works and it's what you want to do. And there's all those options out there for you. If you want to go through, you know, finding the perfect medication, do it. That's what you're thinking you want to do. But if you're also not sure, that's okay. What I would recommend, though, and I know that this can be difficult in the US, is go to a doctor. Discuss these issues with a doctor. There are other ways you can cheaply access a doctor nowadays. I have great healthcare through my job, so it's very cheap to access a psychiatrist or a psychologist. But there are things like BetterHelp, I know of, that you can go online, and it's an app, and, you know, it's kind of like a co-pay situation, I believe. And there's other apps where you can do that and kind of just talk to someone about what your options are and what you're feeling, and just kind of talk out where you're at and what your goals are. What are your goals? Are your goals to be completely unmedicated? Are your goals to get to a certain emotional space, whether that's medicated or not? I just really recommend you find a doctor that you trust, that you can talk to about this. And if it's not a doctor, talk to people in your life, you know, see what they say and listen to their experiences and think about what's right for you. Because honestly, I don't know what's right for me right now. All I know is for right now, I don't want to go on medication. That may change in the future. That's where I'm at with it. And I hope me talking about my journey with you has helped you think about what your journey might be with medication and where you would like to go with it or not. Thank you for listening today. If you've been enjoying what you're listening to, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening to your podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify. I would love to hear the feedback and it will help me reach out to more people so they can hear all of this great information about having autism and ADHD. You can also reach out to me on my Brain is a Wonderland pod on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Gmail. All right, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time on My Brain is a Wonderland, Season 2.